Hello, good evening, and thanks for your patience with our brief delay. The board meeting will begin momentarily. Our board chair has stepped out for a moment, but he should be back shortly. Thank you.
May, what day is it again? 25th to order. We're going to start with a land acknowledgement from Marnie Jackson.
Thank you, Anne. And before I begin sharing our land acknowledgement, I would actually like to invite us to take a minute of silence in honor of the community of Uvalde, Texas, and the lives lost there this week. If you can just join me with a moment in quiet reflection. Thank you. South Whidbey School District acknowledges that we gather on the ancestral homelands, originally known as Chocolchi in the Lushootseed of the coastal Salish peoples, on the lands of the Lower Skagit, Tulalip, Swinomish, Suquamish, Stillaguamish, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin since time immemorial, who have hunted, fished, and gathered here, and who have taken care of these lands. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and we honor their sacred spiritual connections with the land and water. Please join us in expressing our deepest respect for the Indigenous people of this territory and our gratitude for their enduring care and protection of this land which we currently occupy and share through the Treaty of Point Elliott, signed by 82 tribes in Mukilteo on January 22nd, 1855. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Was the announcement of the executive session made at the beginning?
No.
Okay. I will note here that the board was in executive session for approximately an hour and a half. This was announced ahead of time. No one was here at the time, but at this immediately before this was announced, it was to review the performance of a public employee and to discuss possible litigation for the district. So that's a required announcement. Usually it happens at the beginning of a meeting, and it did, but if I don't mention it now, it won't be caught on the webinar. So I also mention it now. Okay, we'll move on to the opening items. Just to note that this is a meeting of the board in public. So if people would like to make public comment, there will be a period for that. If you are present in person and would like to speak, please go back to Mrs. Macaro in the back and sign up there with your name and location. If you are online, I'm trying to get into the webinar right now. And hopefully I will be able to do that shortly, but if you'll put your name and address in the Q&A function, if you're in the Zoom webinar, and then start typing your comment, when you put in your name and location, then we will know that you want to make comment. We'll move on to the agenda and minutes. Are there any objection to approving the agenda and minutes as presented? Hearing none, the agenda and minutes are approved as presented. We'll now move on to presentations. We have our highly capable learners program here. Dr. Moshe, would you like to introduce them?
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fankhauser and Tracy McKnight. Dr. Fankhauser administers the program and Tracy is boots on the ground for us and doing an outstanding job.
I have very little to say other than to say the best thing that I have done so far is finding Tracy McKnight. And we have a 3-4 program that caters to our 3rd and 4th graders, led by Miss Karen Plouffe. And then Mrs. McKnight handles our 5, 6, and 7, 8 cohorts at both schools and does a fantastic job. And most of the people in this audience tonight are wonderful, highly capable program students, and I will turn it over to her.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tracy McKnight. I am HCL instructor for grades 5 through 8. We have 21 students in the program, 5th through 8th grade, and we meet once a week on Wednesdays. Students in the HCL class, they choose a field of study. They design their own project. They set goals that they hope to achieve for the year. They plan, create a timeline, and present their plan and project updates to their classmates through the year. And their peers give feedback throughout the process and assist with their own unique skills. So everybody in the room is learning about something different. So that's an interesting room to walk into and see what we're all doing. Examples include robotics, coding, poetry, writing a novel, architecture. We are even having a student write a tax plan. We've had a great year this year in HCL, which included a Special Olympics robotics team and an amazing field trip that we just took to iFly, a STEM field trip with indoor skydiving. So I've had some students here tonight to share their projects as well as their experiences on the robotics team and field trips. I'm going to hand it off to first Carter McKnight.
Hello, my name is Carter McKnight. I've spent the last 3 years in HCL exploring computer science. It is one of my possible career choices. In HCL class, I began coding in various programs like Microsoft MakeCode, Scratch, and a Google Computer Science First program to learn basic Java and Python. In 6th grade, I coded a video game. It had basic 2D animation. This year, my HCL project was to learn 3D animation. I used 3D computer graphics software for that. My goal was to learn to animate water this year mainly. So this is, it was Halloween-ish time, so I animated a ghost. And the main thing with that was getting the smoke to work that you can see there, which took a lot of shading and stuff. Next slide. Okay, there we go. So this one I had to, you can see every single blade of grass there, and you can see all the flowers. That was hard because I had to do a lot of things at the same time, which took a lot. And that was the real challenge with that. But next slide. This is the like behind the scenes on the next one that I'm gonna show. It has you can see on the top left, the purple was when I accidentally textured it wrong. And then the bottom right was when I textured it right, and that's how it looked before I finished it up. Next slide. And that was the first thing I got there. It was, I had the work, the big thing with that was the smoke on the ground, like the fog and stuff. That was pretty difficult to get. Next slide. And then with this one, I had to actually really work on getting the light to come through in certain spots in the trees, which was really difficult. Next slide. This is the, when I finally figured out how to shade things correctly, I made this house and made shadows and stuff. And then I got to really learn how to make anything I wanted to through modeling. And when I made this one, next slide. And this is my first steps towards making water, which was my goal this year. It's the little, but it's basically this fountain where it sprays up water and it goes back into the thing. And that was difficult because I had to make the water fly up and then come back down. And that took a lot of physics actually involved in it. So that was quite difficult. That one's pretty short, but it's basically just an ocean with moving water with stars. And for that one, I had to download stuff and mainly work on how to get the light to like reflect off the water correctly while also reflecting how the stars looked. So that was pretty hard to get right and took quite a while. But that was my final thing of water. Next slide. Oh, that's it. Yeah. Thank you for watching and listening. Any questions?
I'm exceedingly impressed. I actually worked in the casual game industry previously years ago, and I'm really impressed with the 3D rendering of the building and the water. Both were spectacular, especially for the as early in the progress that you are. Amazing.
Thank you.
Teddy and Aaron.
Hello, this is me and Aaron, and we are working on a strategy card game that is like based off of the pandemic and what had happened during then, where you try to build up a population and you have another player competing against that to try to decrease your population to whatever their goal may be.
And so in doing this, we have designed 35 unique front and back game cards using a graphic design and layout program. And we printed the cards and conducted trials and with other students to figure out what ratios of cards we want and make a few adjustments to the cards themselves. And we're still working on that. And what we learned about was a lot about how underappreciated game companies are. And we learned how to put pictures together and on a little card and format it to be printed. And we had a lot of problems at first with the trials of the game, but I think we've kind of gotten a bit of progress with that. We will have it professionally printed front and back, and we hope to maybe market the game. So here we have one of the backs of the cards, the purple one, and the orange house is one of the cards that would be on the front. And oh yeah, there's 4 different backs for the cards. One on the right is a school, which counts towards your population, which is what you get to win the game. And the one on the left is a vaccine, which is used to fight off the disease. And the one on the right is used to boost your vaccine. On the left, it allows you to, it's a card that protects you from the disease player. And on the right is one of the cards that the disease has. Like there. Good little.
I'm going to go a little.
Aaron and Dylan. Or Emery and Dylan.
Hello, my name is Dylan McKnight, and me and Emery and we're Team Aries. We competed in a 6-week-long robotics competition through Special Olympics. We teamed with students from Special Services, and we designed and built a robot from a Lego Mindstorm kit. It was a BattleBot style competition, and it was in Renton at Liberty High School. The rules of the competition. The robots compete in a 3-foot circle with a black ring. Robots try to push each other out of the ring. If the robot even goes halfway out of the ring, it loses. Judges are allowed to interfere if the robots get stuck. Building Aries. We named our robot Ares after the Greek god of war, and because almost everyone on the team was an Ares. Robot Ares is designed to look like a ram, the Ares symbol, and Ares has a ramp on the back to a ramp on the front to lift up wheels of opponents, and a knuckle cage, as we call it, on the back. Coding Ares. Coding Ares is very challenging. The light sensor detect the ring and drive. We had to make a light sensor to detect the ring and not drive out, and eyes to have an attack mode to make it sure that it charges opponents. We also coded to make sure it was moving, always moving, so the opponent couldn't catch it. Also, the light sensor, sometimes it just didn't detect the ring and it just drive out for no reason. And that was not our code. We like checked every second and it just wasn't working. And then a video of Ares winning. The one with the red back thing is Ares. The results of the competition. We won 5th in our division. Also, we won the Team Spirit Award.
I was wearing a string of lights.
This is the first time we done the competition for the entire school. So yeah. Also at the competition, they gave out a bunch of pom-poms and cowbells for everyone. And so yeah.
So that was
We heard cowbell for days after that competition. So we've got Annie and Atlas with our field trip.
We're here not necessarily to talk about our projects for the year, but actually the field trip that we went on. We took a STEM field trip to iFly, which is basically an indoor skydiving tunnel in Seattle. We were like, well, we're going to take a field trip at the end of the year, like we always do. So we were brainstorming and we decided to go to iFly. All the HCL classes attended from 3rd to 8th grade. The field trip began. We were discussing the gravity, friction, and velocity and the terminal velocity. And so it's basically a big wind tunnel. And so we experimented with a lot of different objects like rubber chickens and like this kind of cylinder object. And we actually did water, and the water was really cool because we were trying different speeds to see when the water would like fly up the tunnel. And that was really cool. And then after our like orientation video of like experimenting what speeds the wind works at, we got in our flight suits and we look kind of ridiculous, but you know, it's all in good fun. And then we have a video of flying if it loads. Oh wow, that's That's coming. That's coming.
For those watching at home, we had someone in the audience ask if they had to do math to figure out how the wind blows. and that's coming.
Yeah, okay. So here's the math part. We calculated our own terminal velocity, the frontal space of us, to see what was our our average. What was the top or average? Our average wind speed. So we took a lot of tape measures and we were like, okay, the torso and the legs are this height, and now we've got to times this by a number. And then we found out, and usually we came within 10 of what our actual number is. And the closest, the people that got really close were Teddy and Carter. And they got a t-shirt and a free flight, which I'm kind of jealous of that, but yeah. And that was it. I mean, it was really fun, and I hope we can do it again next year. Any questions? There's the video. It's really cool. It kind of surprised us all with this. We weren't not expecting to go completely off the ground. We were all before, he was just kind of low key, swinging us around. He's holding on, he's on the ground, and then he just lifts off, and we're like, all right, that's it.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Just really amazing to see the work that you are guiding yourself through and learning. And really awesome to see how different modalities and different subjects are cross-pollinating into your projects. And it is really encouraging to see what you're coming up with in guiding your own learning.
Yeah, +1 to what Director Downs said. And I have a question perhaps for Dr. Moshe. How are students identified for this program? And a two-part question. And how do you and your leadership team ensure equity in inclusion to this program?
And Dr. Fankhauser is really going to be able to direct the answer of that. And we have psychologists in the district who help, but one of our proudest efforts right now is that we have students who are twice exceptional, who are participating, which is really a step towards equity. But Jeff?
A great question. We used to do it by student and parent and teacher referral. So then they would take a test in May. This year we've moved to a universal screener. And so in 2nd and 5th grade, students are taking the Naglieri is the name of it. And so it's a universal screener for highly capable identification. And it generally, the qualification is usually top 5%, most top 2% of all students. And we have quite a few of those amazing folks here today, and super proud of them and the work they're doing.
Just to clarify, the assessment itself, because it's across every student at those 2 grade levels, and the assessment itself is built for that equity piece, we're confident that students can be selected for this inclusion in this program, regardless of classroom performance, socioeconomic status, teacher referral, and all of the sort of typical ways it used to be done.
Thank you.
I just wanted to note, I'm going to nerd myself again. I worked on a collectible card game professionally, and so I'd love to play that game at some point. Yeah. I'm shocked that they let you use water in a wind tunnel, but it sounds awesome. Absolutely awesome. And thank you for sparing our delicate sensibilities and not having the volume on so we couldn't hear any screaming or any words we shouldn't. because I know I would have been saying words we shouldn't if I was in there. Thank you. For those that, yeah, for those at home, he responded, we wouldn't have been able to hear the screaming because the wind tunnel was very loud. Thank you. Mrs. Macaro, I am not in as a presenter. If you could draw me in, thank you. Thank you. I love hearing about all the various programs that we have going on. Thank you very much, everyone, for presenting. We'll move on from there to the consent agenda. Do I hear any objection to approving the consent agenda as provided? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved as provided. We will now move on to public comments. Are there any folks here in the room who have signed up? Who is first?
Thank you all so much for coming. You did a great job.
Ready on the time?
Okay. Margaret King Clinton. Over the course of the last couple of decades, public schools have moved from being solely concerned with academics, reading, comprehension, writing, math, history, science, and art, to being all around social service providers. Public schools now provide breakfast and lunch and may expand to dinner. Public schools, let's see, sorry, lost. Schools survey students several times a year to understand their emotional well-being. Schools hold vaccine clinics. Public schools have taken on the role of local parentis, that schools take the place of parents while students are there. During the same period, public schools have also moved away from local community control to a more centralized control by the State Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction and various unions and associations. OSPI creates curriculum and policies. WSSDA writes and encourages policies. At school board meetings, we hear much discussion on student voice, and it is important that students have an active role in their education. However, what is not discussed to the same degree is parental voice. This evening, I would like the board to consider a resolution to parent voice in the public education of their children here in South Whidbey School District, and resolve to put in place policies that reinforce South Whidbey's commitment to parents' rights of knowledge and consent for their children attending public schools. Recognizing parents as primary stakeholders in their children's lives up to the age of majority. Whereas by judicial decision, Washington State provides that mature minors are capable of meeting the informed consent standard, have consent authority in healthcare. In determining whether the patient is a mature minor, providers will evaluate the minor's age, intelligence, maturity, training, experience, economic independence, or lack thereof, general conduct as an adult, and freedom from controlled parents. Whereas on September 30th, 2021, President Joe Biden's Education Secretary, Miguel Cardona, said parents should not be the primary stakeholder in their children's education during his testimony before the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. And whereas on April 27th, 2022, during a celebration at the White House honoring Teachers of the Year, President Joe Biden repeatedly told teachers gathered, "Children's are yours when they're in the classroom, and they're not someone else's children's, they're ours." And whereas the Office for the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Washington State School Directors Association, the National School Board Association encouraged policies for school district personnel to deny parents notification, knowledge, or consent in critical decisions affecting a student's education, mental, emotional, or physical well-being. And whereas the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction is encouraging the insertion of school-based healthcare centers in all districts of Washington State in alliance with the Washington State Health Authority and federal government direction. And whereas the state or federal governments or agencies enact mandates, policies, or laws which subjugate parental rights and authority over the education, health, and upbringing of children to government agencies. And whereas the family unit is the foundation of society, whereas children are not raised by the state, whereas parents are the primary stakeholders responsible for their children's upbringing, education, health, physical and emotional well-being, whereas parents have the unalienable right to knowledge and consent for their children's upbringing, education, health, physical and emotional well-being. Therefore, let it be resolved, South Whidbey School District recognizes parents are the primary stakeholders in their children's life up to the age of majority. Parents' right to knowledge and consent in critical decisions regarding their children's education, health, and emotional well-being, which are fundamental to their upbringing. Children do not belong to the collective state. Children belong to the parental family unit. The state and federal governments or their agencies shall not infringe on parents' rights to knowledge and consent regarding their children's education, medical, emotional, mental, or physical health and welfare. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing the comment. Is there anyone else in person? Okay, I can't see the Q&A list right now. Is there anyone listed there?
Cynthia Shelton is indicating that she is reporting that I am representing the South Whidbey Schools Foundation at tonight's meeting. That's the only Q&A we have.
We're getting a sign up now.
Quick question. You know, the issue of the Pledge of Allegiance was up months ago, and I thought you were going to deal with it. And it sounds like it's been basically tabled and ignored. And I'd like an answer why.
Thank you for sharing that concern. The comment period is not a period for back and forth discussion. You can certainly send us that question in email, or if it comes up on a agenda for a Q&A or discussion on a topic about that, you can certainly share that then. Do we have anyone else signed up? Okay, then we'll move on from public comment to new business. First item is Memorandum 2122-49, approval of the update to South Whidbey School District Policy 2140, Comprehensive School Counseling Program Update. I'll turn this over to Andrea as our policy expert and leader.
So this, let me pull it up real quick. This doesn't have any changes beyond what we discussed at the workshop. So it is looking at changing how counselors are interacting within the school system. Dr. Moshe is tasked with working out a plan, which she is well aware of and moving forward with.
Are there any other comments or questions on this item from the board? I'd like to offer to our student representatives for a advisory vote.
Yes.
Okay, that's an abstention. That moved on. We'll go on to the actual votes. All those in favor of approving the update to South Whidbey School District Policy 2140 Comprehensive School Counseling Program Update, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Memorandum 2122 has been passed. The second item is Memorandum 2122-50, approval of the pre-bond planning expenses. Dr. Moshe, we're going to turn it over to Mr. Pullman. Mr. Pullman.
Yes, Integris is the architectural firm that replied to our RFP for services for bond planning. And basically it's a contract with them to provide all the architectural engineering, design services, helping us look at the projects, whether it's re-siding, building covered walkways, whatever it might be. And they would provide the expertise for doing that. They also provide the opportunity to be presented to the community, question and answer sessions, so the community could have input before we actually go out for the bond, and everything that's kind of wrapped up in that process of getting ready to provide a bond to the public.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from board members?
Thank you, Mr. Pullen. In terms of the cost here for this bid, in your prior experience, how does this line up in terms of other commensurately sized bond exploration?
It's pretty similar to what we did about 10, 12 years ago when we were looking at a remodel of the high school at that time. Of course, the hourly rate changes over time, but the amount of work and the support that they are going to offer. And it's an up to type contract. We may not use all the pieces in there, but this is what they are able to offer us. And, you know, it may be less for some things. We have identified a lot of the projects, but now we're at the point where, you know, we need design help. If we're going to work on retrofitting our bathrooms, what can we do to make them more inclusive? What can we do to make sure we're following the ADA guidelines? What are the requirements for the number of bathrooms in a school building based on the number of students? They have that expertise that we don't have in the district. So I think the price, which always seems like a lot, anytime you deal with a public financing of any type, it's going to be very expensive. We're required to do prevailing wage and all the things because we are a public agency that really causes things to be more. But I think it's in line with what we would get from any other architectural firm that we ask to do this type of work. A little bit about Integris. If you don't know who they are, they've been in business for about 75 years, and they predominantly do schools. They do a few other projects, but this is what they do, a very vast portfolio, and they were well recommended by other schools. I will be quiet.
Thank you. You read my mind on my second.
Your time is up, Mr. Pullman.
You read my mind on the second question, which is going to be about the firm themselves. So thank you.
You also read my mind on clarifying that this is at prevailing wage. So it's not just an arbitrary hourly rate.
Were there any other questions? Okay, do we have advisory votes from our student representatives?
Aye.
And abstain. Okay, all those in favor of approving memorandum 2122-50, approval of the pre-bond planning expenses, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please say nay. Memorandum 2122-50 has been approved. We will now, that concludes our new business. We'll now move on to reports and go right back to Mr. Pullman for the financial and enrollment report.
So this is our financial report as of April 30th and our enrollment report as of May 1st. Start with enrollment. Very positive news about enrollment. Last year, we were at 1166.5 for our annual enrollment. We're currently at 1164.5 for this year's year to date. We have one more enrollment period, which is June, but we're going to be within a couple of where we were last year. And you can kind of see in the lower right-hand corner what our enrollment looks like the last few years. So it's, you know, the first time in a while that we've had enrollment basically level. And there's a very important reason. And the upper left is our ALE program. The yellow or the orange is the new program that we started this year, thanks to Susie Richards and the hard work she put into that. But that's the difference between an enrollment that would have been down by 40 versus one that was almost even, was the additional kids we brought in that were not students of the South Willoughby School District the year before because they liked this program. The grade that's attached to it is the Spokane Virtual Academy, and that's an online program that some of our kids take advantage of. The upper right is our total enrollment, and you see that the ALE is a small part. The red is our traditional program in line, but it's that little piece that added to it for this year. And on the bottom, I just want to point out that if we look at this is our enrollment year to date by grade, and the two on the far left is kindergarten and first grade in that mid 50 range. If that trend continues, you can anticipate what that looks like as they move through the classes. Because if you look at the high school, even 7th through 12th grade, they're averaging about 90 kids. So there's a difference in there. So it's important to see what that trend looks like as we move forward. We are 2/3 of the way through our fiscal year. Unlike the school year, which ends in a couple of weeks, we actually go through August 31st for financials. We are also about 2/3 of the way through our revenue collection and our expenditures, both about $14.6 million. The lower right is a comparison of revenue and expenditures. And again, I think I pointed this out last month, but it's becoming real stark. That our revenue normally in April exceeds our expenditure in the last 3 years been by $1.5 million because of a large levy collection that occurs with property taxes in April. This year, revenue and expenditures are almost exactly the same at this month. So we're not seeing that extra revenue bump that we would normally have. And it's predominantly because expenditures have increased. We are okay with expenditures for the year. With our total expenditures year to date and encumbrances, we are at about 96% of our budget. And on the right is basically the breakdown. The large 3 slices are salary and benefits, and the other 2 are non-employee costs that make about 14 or 16% of our budget. On the left side is revenue. The local property taxes is about where it's been for the last couple years. The local revenue for schools, the second from the left, is lower than it was 2 years ago pre-pandemic, but it is larger than it was last year. So that income is growing. The middle largest one that's the bulk of our funds. It comes from the state, and you can see that it's declining over time. And there's reasons we talk about that. Regionalization costs, number of students, et cetera. The next one is state money, again, based upon enrollment numbers, has gone down some. And the far right is federal money. And you see that the blue in that column is much larger than normal. And that's the ESSER funds, which we will have this year and next year. And then we'll be gone after that. What I point out in the bottom left is that the red dotted line is the current year's revenue. It's not really that different than the previous years. So basically our revenue has been flat, or actually has gone down a little bit over the last 3 years. Where on the right side is the expenditures, and you see the yellow line is above all the previous years. So basically revenue's flat and expenditures are continuing to grow. And that's predominantly, salary and benefits tied to the IPD, which is required by the state of Washington to be passed through, and then anything's negotiated above that. So real quickly, this is just our revenue and expenditures. And as mentioned, revenue is about 14.6 million, expenditures to date about 14.6 million, and an ending fund balance of a little over $5.1 million. Another way of looking at it is a balance sheet, assets and liabilities, pluses and minuses on a spreadsheet. Comes up with the same fund balance, but it just, where is the money sitting? Is it cash on hand in a local bank? Is it cash on deposit, county treasurers? Is it warrants outstanding, et cetera? We do have other funds. Capital Projects Fund currently has about $3 million in it, and that's a fund that is property taxes. We've spent about $1 million so far. We have quite a few other projects that are happening. We'll draw that down. Debt service is for repayment of a loan to the state of Washington for energy retrofits. We do have a June 1st payment of $81,000, which will use up most of that balance. ASB, good to see that the balance there has increased to about $72,000, so it's building itself back up. Transportation Vehicle Fund has basically no money in it and won't until August when we get reimbursement for school buses. And the private purpose trust fund, which is for scholarships and things like that, has about a $789,000 balance in it. One thing I also want to report, we just wrapped up our state audit with the Washington State auditors. Started mid-February and went through May 15th, so it was a very long period. We were issued an unmodified opinion on both our financial statements and our federal programs. That basically means that it's a clean audit. They didn't find any issues. There was no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies in internal controls, no non-compliance of state or federal regulations, and no findings with our federal programs. The report, if anybody's interested in actually seeing the report, is on the Washington State Auditor's website, which is on the lower right-hand corner. It's a 54-page report that looks like this. Anyways, you don't see it. Yeah, you don't see it, but it's not on our website because I can't put it on now. We're switching websites and we're in the middle of that, but it is on the state auditor's website. And it has the full report that you can read if you are interested in that. And that's my report for tonight, unless you have some questions.
Congratulations on the clean audit, Dan. That's not a small feat.
I was going to say the same thing, but yeah. Thank you for keeping our books in order.
And I say this frequently, but think about it frequently as well, and for presenting them to us in a way that is relatively easy to understand. That is no small feat either, because there's a lot of detail in school budgets. So I appreciate that very much. Else? Okay, we'll move on to the student board member report. Audrey.
Okay, so here's our student representative report for May 25th. At the high school, there was a band concert that was canceled, but it actually got rescheduled. So that's really exciting to hear. There's also been a lot of graduation activities. I know the seniors are prepping. There's a meeting today. And there's also been college and career posters in the front hallway where students can sign where they plan to go after high school. So that was really exciting to see. Finals are just around the corner. So in a few of my classes, we've been getting ready for those and students have been talking about them. There's also been really fun leadership activities planned recently, such as it's actually not Capture the Flag, it was Ultimate Frisbee. And then there was cake ball as well. And ASB elections today, we got to cast our class vote for our class officers. So that was really exciting to see the different candidates. The senior class got 9 candidates, which is just outstanding. So the turnout was really great to see. There's also been some discussions with clubs about club funding concerns and how advisors can get reimbursed for the work they've been putting in throughout the school year, and how to keep clubs alive, and how you really need funding to do so to attend events and plan activities. So just kind of figuring and laying out the plan for next year and how to really keep clubs alive and active. And then at the Southie Middle School, the band concert got rescheduled as well. So that was good to hear that it's still going on. I got to see a really great promotional post for the Spirit Week coming up at the middle school. So that was really fun to see. Next week, there's ASB elections. I've had the honor to work with the public relations of the ASB branch, but I'm super thrilled to see who the next ASB officers are and how we can collaborate with the high school and with the district to really gain their input and concerns. On the 10th, there is an 8th grade promotion, and I know the 8th graders have been practicing and getting ready for this. And also in the consent agenda, I was really happy to hear that the Lakeside field trip got approved for the 8th graders, because I think that's just a really great way to end middle school. And I know the 7th graders are getting ready for a field day. So really great things happening at both campuses. And then kind of wrapping up the end of the school year for student representatives, we wanted to find a better way to structure our report for the future, especially with a new student representative on board, and finding if we want to do this school-based and still go through the different campuses through updates, or and kind of like break it down to the different campuses, visiting assemblies and kind of figuring out schedules to interact with students that way, as well as hearing more about extracurriculars, activities, clubs, ASB, kind of narrowing how we want to focus this report. And I think this is something Sol and I wanted to gain the board's input on, and what they'd like to see in the board reports to make it the most impactful information that can kind of influence the board's decisions and gain updates. So are there any questions or ideas for this slide?
I want to go back a slide if I can real quick.
Please do.
What's cake ball?
Okay, I have to be honest, I'm not exactly sure. It has something to do with soccer and it has something to do with a cake, but I'm not sure how they coincide, but.
Okay. Yeah, thoughts from board members on direction of student board
Yeah,
reports?
I want to revisit a conversation that we had earlier in the year around this topic. And I recall that we were looking at what is the upcoming theme of the meetings that we were embarking on, what was coming up in workshops, and then kind of structuring the student representative reports based on that feedback. And so I think it would be maybe with our board retreat coming up, if we're forward looking, like mapping out what it is that our next year looks like and what might be some good topics to put on the table so that you have, 9 months of lead time on what you're looking for.
So one of the things that I did some research around, and the board knows this, as do the student representatives, is what other districts have done. I'm particularly interested in doing a student advisory forum that would involve the student board members and select students, however they're selected, from other campuses, and that we would be able to come together once a month, perhaps involve their building principals or something to that effect, so that going there is certainly something that I love that the student reps are doing, but the idea of gathering information and having discussion about the district's goals and direction and getting students involved in that. And one of the things that happened in Pasco was the district that was recommended last time that I speak to, and I spoke to their superintendent, and they have moved on from student advisory to student action committee, and they have built their district plan to include students in the goal setting, but in the goal setting to the point that they pick an area and work toward meeting a goal in that area that is meaningful to the students. So I thought that might be a path to go down as well.
I would also love to see some student input on, because one of my favorite things about board meetings is when students are here and we learn about their achievements and we learn about what's going on in the classrooms. I would love some feedback from student representatives around, student board representatives around who we're not seeing. Who haven't we brought to the board meeting or invited to the table to, show off how cool they are and what they've achieved?
Yeah, I know that the two of you frequently say how overpolled the student body is. And so I think these are great ideas to get more student voice without having to resort to polls. So I really do like that. And in terms of school-based versus campus-based, my observation on the middle high campus is that although there's one campus, the programs feel very different. The students are at different ages, so they have different needs and desires. And so I personally would prefer the school-based if you're choosing between the two.
Yeah, I really resonate with what's been shared, and I would just add that one of my favorite things about the reports that you have been bringing is when you can add insight into student experience that isn't available in the Navigator, because that is such a great resource. But it's possible in a board meeting to look at a different set of information or to go a little more deeply into areas that the board has, where the board has particular interest that are different than kind of the public highlights, which is also of interest, but we can get that information in other ways.
And I know that we've talked in the past about focusing on particular goals and getting feedback on those from the students. And that might go along with ways that we're discussing what the board does with students, that we're turning this more into a two-way channel of communication where I know that you'd both mentioned interest in communicating with the student body about what's going on at the board level also, so they're more informed with that. So there might be something about that where we can talk about one of the goals at a time and try to provide some more information on why that's a goal of the board to the student body and then get feedback on that.
I think that really echoes what Joe was saying in terms of like pulling the students together. But I also appreciate from the Pasco model that it keeps the conversations where it should be, right? And happening where they can be most efficient and effective, which is also something that we communicate out to the public and we communicate it out to staff quite frequently of, this is the level and this is where you can actually get your need met. And so I appreciate that about the Pasco model.
Thank you. Okay, we kind of covered this one previously. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this one's kind of just in general, how much focus should be put on the report, or if we should put our effort towards other areas, and just in general, what should be the priorities of the future student representative and me next year?
I think that the board would have to discuss that a little bit more before coming up with a single answer on that. Yeah.
I would think June 8th, when we start talking about goals, that might be a perfect time to incorporate that.
And I also think that you should be included in that conversation in determining those priorities.
It would be amazing if, like we did this year, the board set goals for the superintendent, who then set goals for the building leaders, who then worked with their teachers to set school improvement goals. And then if we bring the students into that, then we've got a complete picture of the impact of whatever the board is setting as priorities, how it impacts students and how they can help move those goals forward.
And which of those goals impacts their lives most as well. Yeah.
I was particularly taken last night. Brooke and I were able to go to Anacortes and we heard from the student representatives up there and their participation at the board level and the district level in picking, parsing out the district's goals and picking an area of interest. One student picked student mental health and the available resources for students around mental health. Another student picked
integration of the social emotional learning curriculum.
Right, and how they use Character Strong, and they also found it to be a little trite, and how they could improve it and whether or not they wanted to keep it. From the student perspective, was it impactful? So again, doing things that actually have a meaning to the students at the school level.
Yeah, and they tied those very closely in with their goals. And so it was, as you were saying, it's something that the student representatives picked a part of the goals that really spoke to them. Yeah.
Audrey, with your permission, I have a question for Dr. Moshe that's on the topic. Will we know the incoming second student board rep by the 8th? Will be Sol's our successor?
I'm not sure how close they are in selecting the rep.
Thank you, Mrs. Phillips. The plan is that we will have that person in place the last week of school.
That would be
we just had our,
potentially on the 8th.
yeah, we just had our class elections today, and Mrs. Phillips has 8th graders elections next week. So we'll have our full group next week or the final week, and we'll meet.
So it's entirely possible, but certainly Audrey can carry the message if she's the only student rep at that point.
Definitely. And thank you for sharing that information about Anacortes, because at the WASDA conference, I had really great connection with Anacortes student reps. So it's really great to see how they're continuing their work. I really like the idea of kind of pinpointing goals and just having that organization and that target is super important.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how the student representative position continues to evolve. It's evolved quite a lot this year and how it will continue to evolve going forward. So.
Well, thank you for listening to our report. Are there any more questions on the report as a whole?
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, wait, I actually just thought of a question. I'm sorry. You had mentioned earlier on in the report, you had reported some difficulties for funding difficulties from student clubs. Will you please speak a little bit more about that?
Sure. So recently I've kind of been talking a little bit with students and their advisors about how it's really hard for advisors to put in the additional time out of school when they're not getting reimbursed for it. And there's also limitations to funding, which kind of block students from attending different activities and conferences. And Model UN, for example, a lot of times students pay for conferences out of pocket, which creates kind of an inequity for students who are unable to pay for the conferences. So just examples like that. But there's also club fundraising as well for clubs who self-fundraise through bake sales. So it's kind of just finding the balance in funding.
I'm wondering, since we have Ms. Shelton viewing in, whether or not it might be worth having a conversation with the schools foundation about whether they could help scholarship some of those pieces. Because I think that would be in alignment with what a school foundation does. But I could also be wrong.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the superintendent report. Dr. Moshe.
Thank you. I'm just going to pull my screen up. Okay, so I have a kind of a couple of different prongs tonight on superintendent update. One is there are many, many things happening and I have not captured them all, but I wanted to get them into one place for the board as much as possible because there are a lot of things coming up between tomorrow and June 10th, which is the last day of school. So I leave this for you to read quickly. There's moving updates, choir concert. There's a bunch of activities, as Audrey alluded to, for seniors. There's scholarship night, the senior parade through Langley. We're having a senior barbecue that the whole school is participating in. Then right after that is the retiree barbecue on the same day. Thank you, Rachel, for handling all of the barbecue needs of the district. And it culminates for seniors on June 4th at graduation at noon. That'll be at the high school in the gymnasium. So just wanted to bring the board's attention to all of those activities. You're welcome and invited and hopefully can attend many of those opportunities. Then I wanted to go completely into a different direction because we've talked a lot about before and after school care and infant care, child care. And so Susie Richards and I have had the opportunity, along with Kayla Phillips, to hear from a person from Right at School. And I'm going to give you a little bit more information about Right at School. And I'm looking for the board to give me a nod as to pursuing this. It's a no-cost program for the district. I'll give you a little bit more about that in just a minute. But there are other efforts underway that are not school-based, but will be available to our school families, among others. We have an individual who will be licensed, we anticipate, by September to offer infant to 12-year-old care at the South Whidbey Community Center. So we're really excited about that because that is a population of folks that have been really struggling to get care. I know Andrea has spoken about it here many times. We are also having a conversation with the Island County Child Care Coalition. They also have some options in the works. So again, we've heard the interest and the need, and we're trying to figure out ways to respond. For Right at School, I'm going to give you a brief overview. I am in no way affiliated with this. The district is not affiliated. We heard about it at a conference, and I asked for more information. They very clearly are in many, many districts across the country, and right here in Washington, they're in Edmonds, for example. We're looking to have them potentially come into South Whidbey and maybe even island-wide. Basically, what they do is come into a school district. We have already spoken with the Children's Center. They're excited. This is not competitive, it's augmentative. And so this program would come in, it's parent paid. The district would provide a space for it. It's not just child care, but it is actually, their mission is educational. So they help students with homework, they do hands-on projects, they provide snack, they do all the safety planning. They have a flexible financial piece here. Again, this will be on our website under the board's documents, but this is their pricing. They put it right out there. They offer scholarships. They also offer employee discounts. They look to hire employees, not away from the district, but in addition to their employment with the district, they could be employees in this program as well. So they also train all of the staff. Again, they look to hire local staff. And they also claim to pay more than the current market rate. And they really do everything. And I don't get this from them. I get this from other superintendents whose districts have this on site. They do all of the hiring, the background checks. They check in with the district, but they do all of the work. They do training. People would really benefit from the training they provide. And they also take care of students. And if, for example, a parent doesn't get there to pick up the student, they don't call the building principal. They have a plan in place to take care of that issue, to get in touch with parents. So I really kept looking for the other shoe and asking all of those questions because what's the downside for the district? There is no downside for us because we don't have any competition. There could be downsides in a district, for example, that had a Y program, and then this group came in and potentially might undercut an existing program, which is why we called the Children's Center immediately before even thinking about this, and they were pleased. They're not doing before and after care, and they don't see it happening. So essentially, the superintendent has the authority to enter into a contract like this, but I really want the board to be aware and on board with doing something like this, because what happens that the district is also signing up for is to put the information out to families and to be that conduit for sending out flyers and making sure that people know about the program and can take advantage of it if they wish to. Again, they full insurance liability, they're accredited, they're, have all of the business pieces. It's just a matter of, do you want me to venture into this and try it? We could do it for a year. There's no obligation. You can cancel the contract in 30 days. So I think it might be something that we want to consider offering our families.
Thank you. I'm curious if there's an enrollment threshold that makes it viable for them to offer this program.
Great question. They prefer to have an area that can provide 150 students, but because we're so close to Edmonds, and they do that for management, because we're so close to Edmonds, they're willing for a year to share that manager. And if we can increase the enrollment by, because they'll go, for example, if it works here, they would put a person or a program at Oak Harbor or at Coopville if they so desired. And that would be part of the 150 students that they need to be sustainable. But they're willing to try it for a year to share this manager and see if it takes off.
Thank you.
I have a couple pieces. I'm wondering if you can go back to their price slide. So the first noticing that I have is that their cost is substantially lower than other options in the area that we do have. And so I really appreciate that. And I also understand that they have scholarships in the sliding scale and a fee scale associated. So I really appreciate that piece with it. The other part that I want to point out is the timeframes that they're open. So 7 to 9, 3:30 to 6. Currently, the longest daycare option that you would have is 7:30. And pickup is by 5, if not 5:30. And so I appreciate the hours as well. And I think that for our families that have to commute off island, that is peace of mind and reassurance. So I really appreciate those parts. The other part that I look at with all of these options, going back to your first slide of what this provides for us is this is how we survive, because if we can't provide childcare to our infants right now, and if we can't provide childcare to our 1-year-olds and our 2-year-olds and our 3-year-olds, there will be no 5-year-olds. And so I wholeheartedly support this from a selfish perspective and also from a perspective of, I know there are teachers in our district who haven't been able to find care, and there are families that have to leave because there is no care. One piece that I think might be worth exploring is we do have several military families like myself down here on the south end. And so looking at any partnerships with NAS would be on whether or not there's a CDC partnership that could happen along with this might be of benefit, because that would also support our families in the cost factors.
They did mention reaching out to the military as well, because I guess there's some kind of a military offer for families. I don't know if that's true, but yes, one of the things, should the board give the nod, right, would be reaching out to Oak Harbor and Coopville and see if they have an interest now. It's a lot to lift, even for us. To do this, for them to advertise and get a population by September, but definitely reaching out and saying, hey, let's see how this evolves. But yes, thank you.
I understand this to be revenue neutral at worst, but are there non-financial costs, other resources?
We would need to, we don't have to dedicate a space. They certify spaces to be appropriate to their standards. So for example, they could use this room, but not on a board night. So they may go to the gym or the library. So there's that factor of making sure that there is a space for them every day before and after school. But no cost to us, and potential, not in the first year, but there is even potential revenue sharing. And I think that you can even roll that revenue sharing back so that there are more scholarships. But so that is a piece of it, is that you have to provide space. You have to provide their opportunity. They give you all of the information. Their logo on your logo goes out to families saying, this is available at our district. So getting the word out there and being committed to doing that is a factor.
When and if you get into the nuts and bolts, I would just ask that you be curious about how their work would dovetail with our emergency preparedness plan and our power outage response and so on, just to make sure that procedures line up.
Yeah,
Great.
and they actually are in Washington already, so their safety plans are congruent, and they adapt to our plans. So that was a question that we asked pretty immediately. What do you do to keep children safe? How do you drill for these kinds of events and so on? So they're prepared for that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, that got me thinking about like our 2-hour delays and how that would work with this. But since they're working with school districts all across the country and
Right.
the state, they're
They
clearly
actually have
ready for-
non-school, unless it's catastrophic, they offer non-school care, non-school day care for a Monday through Friday. So for example, on our early release Wednesdays, care would begin earlier, not wait till 3.
You mentioned that this is a short turnaround to launch. Can we go into contract with them at any time? Like, let's say in September, we don't have the numbers they need to start. Can we, kind of proceed to keep doing the work until we get the, percentage of population that they need in order to stay?
So they are willing to do startup. That's the plan. So for example, they don't anticipate they're going to have a full program in a district our size right off the bat. So that's why they're willing to try for a year and see if they can establish.
There's like no set ratios or percentages. There has to be this many kids in the program to make the thing work.
Right. Not for us right now. They're willing to give us that. They would want, again, 150, but they know that that's probably not in our reality as far as we know. But if, again, that 150 would be in the area. So if Oak Harbor and Coopville joined, or let's say there are even Mukilteo families that, live here but work there and they want to drop off here or something. So they would count all of that.
It would be interesting to me how many kids come back, because I think of when I was working in Everett and doing the ferry, and when my son was little,
He's still little.
He is still little, even though he wants to be cutting down trees right now. It wasn't even a question. If I was working in Everett, my son would have to go to Everett.
Right.
Because the time doesn't work.
Right.
And so it would be interesting with a program like this, how many kids might be able to come back.
Absolutely. And this combined with if there is infant care or, toddler care launched at the community center and the other efforts that are underway, we might actually be able to have families accommodated.
So I want to reemphasize something that Dr. Moshe said, which is this is something that the superintendent can do without our consent. She's just looking for our approval. And it sounds to me, based on comments, that the board as a whole is enthusiastically behind this. If anyone is not, now's the time to speak up. I think you have your nod.
Thank you so much.
And that's the superintendent report. We will move on to board comments and report. I'd like to begin this actually. And I would like to present this certificate of appreciation to Sol Rabinovich for the service as student representative. And note that we really appreciate your passion, that you've driven us to incorporate student voice very strongly, and that has been a consistent drive of yours, and that passion will do you very well going forward into the world. I think that finding things that you're passionate about and following them will be fruitful for you. So I want to share my appreciation with you for bringing your views on student voice and sharing your expertise on the student body with the board, and for weighing in on all of the various memorandum and discussions and debates that we've had here. So thank you very much. Are there other board members who would like to make comment?
I would just like to say I've had a really great time collaborating with Sol on the board. And I think there's a lot of times he's made me think deeper about certain issues or ideas. And I really appreciate that. And it's something I hope to carry on into next year and kind of teach the new student representative. So thank you.
I'll echo my appreciation for Saul. I've learned a lot from you. Going to the national conference with you, I learned a lot. Well, from both of you at the Student Voice conference, and I feel like you set the bar high in terms of advocating for your peers, you know, and representing them here on the board. So thank you.
So congratulations on your oncoming graduation and for all you've learned here in our district these last few years. And I wish you much more learning and excitement and that heavy, critical, wonderful thinking that you do far into the future.
Thank you, Saul. I just want to echo the voices that our peers have shared to share how much it's been a pleasure to watch you serve and grow in this role and how much I encourage your many successes to come. Thank you.
I also want to thank you, Sol, for how you have pushed the boundaries, not just for the district, but also across the state. And you've accomplished a lot in the last year. And thank you.
Okay, are there any other board comments or reports to be made? Okay, then I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you. And good night.